Hello and welcome everyone to a review of the game Armies and Alliances Arnhem 44. I've posted a solo playthrough of the game on my YouTube channel as well if you want to get more of an idea of how the game is played, but I'll briefly go over the rules as well, and I'll point out what I like about the game, what I think might have been done better, and finally, I will also briefly discuss things that, I call it missing in action, things that could have been there but aren't. Briefly, I'll go over the sequence of play first, and this is part of some player aids that I've made myself, and I've made them available to the public as well. If you go to the files to this game on Board Game Geek, you'll find it there as well. So the game starts with the card phase, and what happens then is that the active player and the allies always go first. What they do is you start with 5 cards each, and then when it's your player turn, each game turn, you draw 2 more cards. Now, what do cards look like? You can find 2 examples here. Typically what they do is they give you some extra combat power. CF on the card means combat factor, so it increases your combat capabilities, or basically your firepower. And what you will typically find as well is it will get some increased movement. There are some other cards as well, but this is what you get quite a lot. And well, the cards really add to the game, because depending on when you get one, it could really be pretty decisive. To give you one example, there's one card, and I don't know what it's called, but it's an allied card, and it's called Jeeps or something, or at the very least, you get movement as if you had Jeeps. And historically, what happened is that the Allies, that only one Allied unit actually made it to the bridge in Arnhem, and the rest didn't make it there in time. But having that card on the first turn, if supposing you have it available, will probably allow another unit to make it to the bridge in Arnhem off the bat. And that could really make a difference, because infantry in towns in this game are incredibly difficult to dislodge, and if you have 2 of them, that's really going to be a very hard nut to crack. So that would be a great use for that card, for instance. And there are many more, and as I said, depending on when you draw them, could really make a very big difference too. At a certain time, they might not be very useful, and at another time, it might win you the game or cost you the game, basically, if you play it right. So that's it for the card phase. After that, you get the, the air phase, even though that one doesn't start until game turn 2, but when it does, the Allies roll a die. Depending on the result, they get to place a number of aircraft, and once they have, then the Germans get to do the same. Now, I've set up a small example here. These planes would dogfight first. If there are fighters of opposing nations, and you will get a dogfight. The way that happens is very simple. You just roll a die for each side. It's 1-on-1, so you roll 1 die. So theoretically, and I've actually had that happen once, one plane could actually destroy up to 4, I guess, potentially even more. But, as long as you keep rolling higher, one German plane could take out all the Allied planes. In this case, it's just 2. This is not a bomber, it's a transport plane that's there for another reason. So you get to dogfight. Should the German fighter be the only one remaining, then this is a drop zone. That would mean that you cannot drop any supplies there on the airborne resupply phase. What also happens is any adjacent, and German units at least, get to attack the enemy fighters on a roll of 1, and German 88s up to a range of 7 also get to attack such fighters on a 1. Also bombers, by the way. This is an Allied paratrooper. They do not have built-in AA. So they can actually not fire at the German plane. So very briefly, there's also the possibility of bombardment, ground bombardment. In this case, it wouldn't happen because they're actually all over the drop zone. But suppose that this German fighter were actually in this hex with the allied with a British paratrooper, then it could attack it instead. Obviously, bombers are much stronger at ground attacks than fighters are. So I've already briefly mentioned something about the resupply phase for the airborne troops. The way that works is you roll a die, and depending on the result, it lands on target or adjacent to it. If it falls into an enemy ZOC and there are no friendly units there, they're destroyed or captured, if you will. At the very least, you can't use them. And in this specific case over here as well, it could actually land off board, and then you lose them too. And around Arnhem, that actually happened a lot. That supplies fell into enemy hands and they never reached the British airborne troops. So that is very nicely modeled in the game. Then you get the movement phase. Well, depending on lots of terrain types and the type of unit it is, obviously it's either relatively easy to move and to get quite far, or sometimes it's much more difficult. Something I tend to forget a lot is that mechanized infantry, self-propelled artillery, armor, and recon units cannot voluntarily, well, they cannot move at all actually, neither can they retreat into nor advance after combat into certain types of terrain, such as rough terrain, broken terrain, and forest terrain. That is something that's easy to forget, but they can do that. Most of the time you'll definitely want to stay on the roads, because movement is by far the fastest there. You can one hex only costs half a movement point, so, and armor and mechanized units, for instance, can move up to 10 hexes if they're moving, well, 10 movement points. So if they're moving on a road, that they could get as far as 20 hexes. And obviously what you want to do as the Allies is to cross the bridges and get to Arnhem and relieve the British paratroopers, as you did historically. The further they get, the more points they will probably score. Well, there's a bit more to movement. The German units can, these arrows don't come with the game, by the way, but the German units can move off the board there. And they can also move back on there. They can, on the other side of the map, you have something similar, also between the two arrows there. If they enter on one side, they cannot leave on the, well, they can only come back on the same side that they actually leave. So that is something you need to keep into account. But you know, for instance, you get some German units on turn 2, I believe it could even be turn 1, that enter over here, but that's usually not where you really need them. Where you really need them at the time is over here, near Nijmegen. So what you can do right away is you can have them enter and right away leave again, so that on the very next turn you can actually have them enter here, which is where they will probably do much more damage. And in general as well, especially on this side of the board, the Germans are supposed to just harass the Allies. If they really get into a fight, they will probably lose it sooner or later. So it's usually a very good idea for them to just harass the Allies, and once the Allies get well, superior in strength and numbers, then just retreat off the board and enter somewhere else, well, I mean, still between the arrows, but a bit further away. And you know, you can always have them enter in the same place again later on if you want. So that is really something that is worth doing. Obviously, you have the combat phase too. Now I've set up a small combat here near Nijmegen. As you can see, the map can get pretty crowded, but I'll tell you a little bit more about that later on during this review. Anyway, I've set up the two sides. What you do is you count up the attack strength. So you go to the battle board. All the infantry units attack on a 1. SS infantry attack on a 2, by the way, but this is the Allies attacking the Germans. Armor attacking a town attacks on 1 as well. As you can see on the battle board, armor is much more effective in clear or mixed terrain. Mixed terrain is, yeah, in many other games it looks like clear terrain, but they call it mixed here. And for instance, movement cost is 2 and not 1. And in this game's successor, which is called Blitzkrieg 1940, I believe, which was recently on Kickstarter, there you actually do have clear terrain. Here's called mixed. Anyway, the most important thing that I was trying to tell you is that armor is much more effective in certain terrain, attacking certain types of terrain than attacking other types of terrain. The mechanized unit that's also there, that's this one, attacks on the 2, and the 2 artillery units participating. This one, the airborne artillery, which has a range of 4 to the target. That's the maximum range for airborne artillery. And this is self-propelled artillery. It has a range of 7, so it's actually adjacent to it. And the 2 German artillery are defending, and both have a range of 7. Only airborne artillery has a range of 4. So they are also participating in the defense. Now here as well, you can see the Germans have a total defense strength of 13. The Allies have a total attack strength of 19, because 2 dice are rolled as well. And the Allies rolled a 5 and the Germans rolled a 1, which led to these totals. Now, if you look at the battle board, you can see that the Allies scored, 19 hits, as I showed here, and the Germans scored 2 hits, and that's a differential of 2 hits. Now, because normally it's about the differential in hits, because the Allies actually scored 4 hits, and I'm not talking about the differential now, just 4 hits. The Germans have to take a hit anyway. Now they would have to now too, but if there were only 1 unit, you could also opt to retreat. But no, in this case, you would have to take that 1 hit, and probably you would have to take the other one too, because if you destroy this one, then you could actually retreat this one. Note that there is no ZOC across the river, even when there's a bridge there. So that would be an option too, but that is getting too technical and too detailed. I won't get into that. But that's basically how combat works. You add up the attack strengths. It's important to note that artillery can both add in its attack strength and defense strength on the same turn. Allied artillery, not all artillery, but airborne artillery actually have to pay one supply or ammo, if you will. It's placed on the board. In this case, it's part of the 82nd, which is this one. You place it here, and that will allow you to fire for the entire game turn. So you can fire once during the Allied turn, once during the German turn. So assuming that, this is actually the Allied turn, but at the end of the Allied turn, you turn it back to ready, and you can use it again on the German turn in defense. So that's how that works. Now, and then in the end, of course, the end of turn sequence, you just advance the game turn marker, you update victory points, and I believe there's one more thing you need to do. You need to remove these things from here. The end of game turn, or the end of turn phase, I should say, is actually a pretty straightforward phase. You don't actually need to do all that much. So in short, that's how the game works as far as the victory conditions go. You basically score points for destroying enemy units, and the Allies score points for getting units across the Vaal River. Not airborne units, mind you, but 30th Corps units, so units that actually enter the board from way over here. But as I said, theoretically they can move very quickly, because as long as they keep moving on a road and they don't need to stop because they enter an enemy ZOC, they can get very, very far pretty quickly. So very briefly, that's how the game works. Now let's have a look at what I really like about the game. Well, first of all, I really like the map, and as you can see for yourself, it's really very detailed. Visually, it's very appealing. So just look at it. I love it. It's a great map. The only thing that you could possibly say about it that is not so great is that it requires a lot of table space, and not everybody has that. But as long as that's not a problem to you, then it's a gorgeous looking map. Other than that, it comes with miniatures. I love miniatures. It makes me feel like that child again, playing with toy soldiers and everything. And sure, I'll play a block game, I'll play hex and counter games, no problem whatsoever. But in the depths of my heart, I guess I just prefer miniature games. I'm very honest about it. So I love miniatures, and this game has them. It has lots of them, so that makes me very happy. Now, what I also like about it, the rules are pretty light, but yet somehow they manage to allow for deep gameplay and also historical gameplay, I would say, as far as you can speak of that. But the supply rules. I'll tell you how supply works, and that's also something I really love. The Germans, what they need to do, what they try to do, is cut off the road, for instance. So this unit, this you have a ZOC, so that would be the hexes around it, and so anything beyond this hex is blocked. So this one is out of supply. I'll tell you why this one is actually in supply. That's because it doesn't necessarily have to use the road for supply. It can also trace supply via this trail, which is in the same hex. So that's why I wanted to show you. But normally speaking, so any units beyond this would be out of supply, such as this one. These two are actually not out of supply because having a unit in a hex negates the supply line being broken. So basically how supply works in this game, it actually works in two ways. Airborne units need to trace to within 7 hexes of their respective drop zones. So this, for instance, is the drop zone of the 82nd, and of course it should not be blocked by some kind of enemy ZOC that will block supply. But as long as they're within 7 hexes of such a drop zone, they're fine. 30th Corps units, and note that because of the situation over here, actually they should all be out of supply, but these are just some separate examples. They don't have anything to do with one another, so I just put them here, assuming that they're in supply. What they need to do is, since they're on a road, they need to trace supply all the way back to these 2 hexes. You always do that for 30th Corps units, so non-airborne, non-German units. So if you start tracing supply on a road, you must stay on a road. If you start tracing supply in a trail, you keep following that trail until you get to a road, after which you need to stay on that road. And if you're on neither, then you need to get to a road, or you need to get to a trail, and then the things that I've just said still apply. So supply rules are relatively simple once you actually get them, which took me a while. And I have to admit that's entirely my own fault. They're clear enough, I suppose, in the rules, but still they confused me a bit. But yeah, they're really great, and they're really accomplish. They really represent the historical situation very well, in which the Allies had a hell of a time keeping Hell's Highway, as they came to call it, open, to keep the supply lines open to their forward troops. So that is really something this game models very, very well. And that goes for many other things too. I'll give you one more example. The Allied artillery units, they, as I just showed you, they need to use these supply tokens or ammo tokens in order to be able to fire. If they run out of them, or they get captured, there could be lots of reasons why they run out of them, but if they don't have them, they can't fire, and they can't fire in support of defense either, and especially here in Arnhem, that's going to be brutal to the Allies once they actually lose, which is quite possible. Once they lose their artillery support, they don't have a lot of combat power left, and offensively they won't be able to do much, and they will probably defensively be overrun by the Germans. So and that is of course also what happened. Maybe not simply because they didn't have any ammo for their artillery, but in general they were short of supplies, which is modeled extremely well in this game by this relatively simple rule. And there are many more, and so as I said, the rules are relatively light, quite comparable to Axis and Allies, I would say, but it does feel much more historical, so that is something I really love about the game. So I've just explained that to you, the airborne resupply rules, how it works, and what the effect is if they're actually out of supply. What I also love is, and I always call these direct hits, by the way, in my reviews, so things that I really like about the game. What I also like about the game is the designer commitment. You post a question on Board Game Geek, or you reach out to him personally, and I think always he has responded to me the very same day. So that's just fantastic, and well, I really appreciate that. Not everybody does that. It's also the first in the series. The second one, as I've already just said, was already kickstarted. France or Blitzkrieg 1940, which is going to be the second installment. There are plans for Barbarossa. And some more games coming up. So I really like that idea, and I'm really looking forward to them. And obviously, I kickstarted Blitzkrieg 1940 as well. So the system is also easily adaptable. The rules in that other game are slightly different to reflect and model the larger scale of that battle, obviously. The terrain and the units involved were much larger, but it's easily adaptable. So those are all lots of things that I like. Now, there are also a couple of things that I felt that could have been done better. I call these off target. As I said about the map, I love it, and I already mentioned one small drawback, and this is again mostly me, but in poor lighting conditions, it's sometimes a bit difficult to see which hex is made up of which type of terrain. Yeah, I mean, they could have chosen to make the hexes much more easily visible by putting a clear grid on it that is actually clearly visible at all times. But of course, that would have gone at the expense of the visual appeal. But, you know, for me, it's sometimes a bit difficult to see which hex is which. Another thing that I feel is a bit off target is the varying quality of the miniatures. That's of course a bit difficult to see probably, but I feel that the Allied airborne units are by far the best infantry units. The plastic seems to be a bit sturdier, a bit hotter. Then you get the American airborne ones, and they're also still okay, but the German ones, I'm not saying they're not okay, but the quality seems to somewhat decrease a little bit somehow. I cannot put my finger on it, what exactly causes it. The plastic seems to be a bit different. The German infantry seems to be made of slightly softer plastic than the other two, or definitely the airborne troops. So it's definitely not the end of the world. The German ones are certainly of acceptable quality as well, but I just wish they had all been of the same quality as the British airborne ones. Now, something else. The silhouettes on the what are they called? The reinforcement sheets are not actually the same as the actual miniatures. Here you can see an actual German SS infantry, and this is a silhouette. This is a regular German infantry. This is a silhouette, which is actually the same as the SS infantry. It's just a different color. Here you have a British infantry, a 30th Corps infantry unit. Here you have the silhouette. Here you have what's it called? A self-propelled artillery unit. I believe it's the what's it called again? I think it's a priest, and the silhouette actually seems to be a German Hummel. Now, I wouldn't say I'm an expert, but I've played many war games, so I actually tend to find out relatively quickly which unit is supposed to be which. But I can imagine that if you're not such an avid war gamer, or this is actually a game that is one of the first that you've ever bought, you're only used to Axis and Allies, that it might take you a bit longer to figure out which unit is which, and that it could be confusing, and it could take up a lot of extra time that you would rather spend playing, obviously. What else is it? Just a couple of things I wrote down. Also something else, a lack of illustrations and tables. This is a typical example from the rule book, and as you can see, there's a lot of text. I'm not saying that most of the time it's not clear. It is usually clear, although rules do tend to be sometimes in different places where you wouldn't really expect them. But anyway, as I said, I personally made a player aid and game turn movement rules, rules related to artillery, the airface, supply, etc. I personally would have much preferred to have the game come with such player aids and with these setup sheets that they might have easily put, as far as I'm concerned, into the rulebook itself, and actually given some player aids, which I believe would have been much more useful. Now, the unit roundels, actually, they all have the actual unit designation on them, but there's only 2 or 3 units in the game, in which case it really matters, because there's some kind of card or something that only applies to that particular unit. Other than that, it's just much easier to not show the text, or just to make that irrelevant, because it's just an extra step, and it makes setup so much faster if you don't have to actually match the right unit to the right text. So you just have to make sure that those 2 or 3 units, that in which case it actually matters, that you have the correct ones, the corresponding ones underneath, and in all other cases it doesn't matter. But in the beginning you don't know that, so that is something, I suppose, the designer might have pointed out in the rulebook to save everybody a lot of time and frustration trying to figure out which one goes where. Well, a couple of things, and I call them missing in action, of things that could have been part of the game but unfortunately aren't. Well, some spare figures. The game comes with exactly enough figures. Now, I tend to be very careful with my games and my miniatures and my counters and what have you. So it's very seldom that I actually lose one, but of course it's always possible, and I'm sure that everybody will be able to somehow come up with replacements somewhere, or even maybe directly from the designer. But it would have been nice to have the game come with a few spares. What else? Well, the entry hexes, as I said, I've just showed them with 2 arrows that I bought at some kind of gaming store. I would have personally liked it had there been some very small arrows printed on the map to denote those places, because the reason I put them is that I was all the time trying to figure out, okay, where exactly was that again that I'm allowed to leave the board or re-enter it, so that it would have been helpful as far as I'm concerned. Other than that, and the things that I've already mentioned, yeah, what I would have liked as well is, as you can see here in Nijmegen, and all the hexes are not even fully stacked, and it's already very difficult to make out where one hex ends and the other one begins, let alone that, all the hexes were fully stacked, which is certainly towards the later stages of the game something that happens pretty often. So I would have liked one player aid to actually contain blow-up hexes of especially Nijmegen, because that's definitely where the where the situation is most pressing when it comes to that. But other than that, there really aren't all that many things that I believe are missing, or that could have been better, could have been done better. All in all, I really like this game. I've played it a couple of times with a friend. I posted this solo playthrough that you can also watch on my YouTube channel, and it's really a lot of fun with a relatively high replayability, for instance, because of the cards. And often there will be things, for instance, as I put out, like, oh, had I only not advanced with these German reinforcements here, but taken them off the board right away and have them re-enter here, I might have been able to overrun the 82nd Airborne over here and won the game for the Germans. What happened to me quite often here with the Allies is that I continuously found my supply line blocked, and I could have prevented that too, for instance, by spreading out these units and negating the enemy ZOC that way. So far, I mean, once you've played it 20 times or 30 times, I don't know if it's still new and fresh. I have no idea. But for many of us own many games. How often do we really play a certain game 20 or 30 times, and when it's not fresh and new anymore? For sure, I do believe that I will be able to play this game at least 10 more times and then still be confronted with new situations, new possibilities, new choices to make. So, as I said, all in all, I really enjoy this game. I really love it. I strongly recommend it. If you like games such as Axis and Allies or other games that come with miniatures and um, don't mind a little extra historicity, and it does not come with much more involved and complicated rules than the Axis and Allies games, or even a breakthrough map of Memoir 44 with some special rules. It's really quite comparable, although again, the historical accuracy in this game is much higher, that you really feel like you are fighting that particular battle and that both sides are actually confronted with the same problems they were confronted with historically. Yeah, so I guess this about sums up my review, and thank you for watching.